Deadlink is a fast-paced roguelike shooter where you spend more time dashing through the air than hiding behind cover. The assortment of tools you get to deal with enemies includes two weapons, a main unique to your class and a more powerful secondary. The first has to be reloaded, while the latter has an ammo limit that needs to be refilled by a punchable ammo ball spawning around the levels or by active effects of your implants. You also get grenades that refuel over time and two abilities specific to your character, one focused on movement and one on crowd control. All three of these mark the enemies they hit, causing them to drop shield pickups upon death. Shield pickups you'll definitely need because your opponents deplete your shield bar quickly and rarely give you a break. During runs you'll find implants that have to be equipped into slots tied to one of four actions that trigger them: switching weapons, destroying ammo balls, or using either of your abilities. You'll also find upgrades, variants, or modifications for all of your kit, your guns, abilities, grenades, and your character themselves. First off, how's the combat? Well, I think it's pretty fantastic under the right circumstances. When it comes to movement, you have a double jump, at least one dash, and a movement ability unique to each of the four classes. Attacking targets with melee will also pull you towards them, and you can clamber up ledges too, so that's the least responsive part of the traversal. Other than that one gripe, the movement is very responsive and fairly fast, but still very easy to control due to the low amount of inertia. Bad dash mechanics can ruin an action game, so it's a good thing that Deadlink's is pretty solid too. Using the dodge actually allows you to avoid incoming damage. It sounds simple, but it's not something you can actually take for granted. Each of the four classes has a different main weapon, two abilities, and a secondary gun that can be swapped out during the run. The differences between these are definitely enough to make them feel distinct, even though they roughly stick to one template, and I found all of them equally fun. While running around, you'll definitely be shooting some guns, so let's look at gunplay. The most important part is how the guns feel to use, and I think the devs did a great job here as well. The first-person animations, sound effects and particle effects on hit enemies all convey a satisfying sense of power to your attacks, and the weapon characteristics make most of them pleasant to use. I can't think of an instance when I was annoyed at my gun's range, accuracy or recoil feeling wrong, and hitting headshot after headshot with the revolver might be my favorite part of the game. It should also put your mind at ease to know that there's no movement in accuracy or aiming down sights. This is a full-on movement shooter. Each character has a different main weapon you can't swap out with no ammo limit on it, though they do have to be reloaded. These are your main workhorses and they feed into the identity of each class. Secondary weapons can be replaced with ones you find doing runs, but their ammo is limited and has to be replenished via punchable orbs spawning around every arena or by the effects of the upgrades you equip in a playthrough. This two-weapon system is a pretty nice balance. Your main weapon not having an ammo limit avoids the frustration of losing due to not having any bullets to shoot, but the secondary, normally more powerful weapon requires you to put in some extra effort to keep using it. Since this is a roguelite, your guns can of course be modified over the course of a run. Main weapons can be modded. This can add elemental damage, improve something like reloading speed, or it can slightly change how the weapon functions. A full auto rifle can fire in bursts, a gun can deal more headshot damage at the cost of a lower rate of fire, and so on. For better or worse, there aren't many of these upgrades. You'll probably end up picking them to fit your build or just according to preference rather than experimenting in exciting new ways every run. Secondaries can be upgraded with simple stat increases or swapped out entirely for one of two random weapons offered on that same screen. Alternate weapons can come in different rarities, which give them bonus traits like preventing self-damage from the rockets you fire. The next element of the core gameplay are status effects and elemental damage. Deadlink has three elements: fire, electricity and corrosion, effective against humans, robots and shields, respectively. The game does a cool thing with UI related to this. Enemy health bars are either blue or red to avoid any ambiguity and maybe serve as a reminder to use the right element on them. Enemies can also be stunned or marked. The first is pretty self-explanatory, and the latter means that an enemy will drop resources when they're killed. This is one of the main mechanics that really push you to play in an active and aggressive way. I think the enemies themselves are designed pretty well. Variations on a basic range grant are the foundation of most encounters, but each area or biome in the game has its own roster of more unique and engaging enemy types. The levels you fight in are simple but effective. Since taking cover isn't something you do much of, the layouts of each arena don't need to be polished to perfection to be fun to fight in, and the game's different areas do have their own general style. The only gripe I have with this aspect of the game is that the last biome has extremely basic arenas. By the end of the run you're fighting in empty rooms with as little as just a single pillar added to break things up. To summarize, Deadlink has everything needed to provide excellent combat, and it ends up doing that a lot of the time. Unfortunately, the game also has a couple of flaws tied to its roguelite structure that can sabotage the core gameplay more often than I'd like. Still, many of the roguelite mechanics are pretty cool. The way the game handles mid-run upgrades is very clever. Implants have to be placed into slots that correspond to one of 4 actions: switching weapons, using one of your abilities, or destroying the floating ammo balls. This means upgrades you pick up during runs aren't just basic improvements. You have to think about when you want their active effects to be triggered in order to make them the most useful and adjust your playstyle accordingly. What's also cool about them is that you can slot them into incompatible slots to get just the passive effects of the upgrades, which adds a little extra depth to the system. Another nice mechanic regarding mid-run progression are the bonuses you can only get if you can survive the next few encounters while having a debuff affecting you, like not being able to dash, double jump, or use grenades. The progression that takes course over a playthrough was done very cleverly, so it's surprising that the meta progression sucks. Between runs you unlock straight up upgrades to stats. Not alternative weapons, spicy upgrades with downsides or alternative abilities, just ways to make yourself more powerful. It's pointless, it's grindy, and it sucks. They're not all simple stat upgrades, but many of them are, and very few go beyond just making something plain better. The worst problem the game has, however, is the way the difficulty is tuned. If you're powerful enough to beat the final boss, most of your run will be very easy. If the first half of your run is actually challenging and exciting, you probably won't be finishing the playthrough successfully. Many of the bosses are so spammy both in regards to how much they attack and how many extra enemies are spawned in, that avoiding damage just isn't very reliable. It often feels like you're meant to outdamage them rather than avoid their every attack. This makes them function as tests of your build as much or at times more so than tests of your skill. This is especially true for the last boss as well. When you're underpowered, you don't only die quickly but also kill enemies slowly. There's no excitement of having to play your best to survive. Instead, the combat starts feeling worse and the game clearly shows you that your character is too weak and you'll probably need to try again. What's sad is that the issues with the game are rooted in pretty fundamental aspects of its design, so I'm doubtful about these things improving with updates, at least in the near future. Still, this doesn't mean the game should be written off completely. If you can forgive it for undercutting its core gameplay sometimes, you'll also get to experience its combat when it's at its best, and it does get pretty great.